I've been driving for one of the major delivery apps for about 3 years now. It started as a side hustle while I was finishing my degree. But after graduation, the job market in my part of rural Missouri was pretty much a wasteland. So the side hustle became the main gig. If you've ever done delivery work in the Midwest, you know it's not all suburban cul-de-sacs and well-lit apartment complexes. Once you get outside the city limits of places like Springfield or Joplin, you're dealing with a whole different world. You get used to the long stretches of dark highway, the gravel back roads that rattle your teeth, and the absolute, crushing silence of the woods at 2 a.m. Working the late-night shift is where the money is, mostly because nobody else wants to do it. You get the drunk crowds, the college kids with the munchies, and the occasional night shift worker grabbing a meal before their break. Most nights are boring. You listen to podcasts, you drink too much gas station coffee, and you try not to think about how much wear and tear you're putting on your car. But every once in a while, you get an order that feels off. It was a Tuesday in mid-November. The air had that sharp, biting cold that tells you winter isn't just coming. It's already here. I had been on the road since 6 p.m. and was planning on heading home around midnight. I was about 5 miles outside of town, heading back toward my apartment, when the app chirped. The payout was $24 for a 6-mile trip. That's an insane rate for this area. Usually, a 6-mile trip might net you $8 or $9 if the person tips well. I looked at the pickup. A 24-hour diner on the edge of the highway, known for its greasy breakfast food. The drop-off was a pin on the map, not a specific address, which isn't uncommon for rural deliveries where the GPS doesn't always have the house numbers right. I accepted it without thinking. I figured it was a high-tipping regular or someone who knew they lived way out in the sticks and wanted to make it worth the driver's time. The diner was empty when I walked in. The waitress, a tired-looking woman named Barb, who'd seen me 100 times, handed me a heavy brown paper bag. It smelled like bacon and over-easy eggs. "Stay safe out there, kid," she said, wiping down the counter. Fog's rolling in thick toward the creek. I thanked her and headed back to my car. As I pulled out of the parking lot and followed the blue line on my phone, I realized the 6 miles the app promised was a bit of a lie. It was 6 miles as the crow flies, but the actual driving distance was closer to 12. The GPS was directing me away from the main highway and onto a series of state roads that I knew ended in nothing but timber and farmland. 10 minutes in, the pavement ended. My tires transitioned from the smooth hum of asphalt to the rhythmic crunching of gravel. The fog Barb mentioned was there all right. It wasn't a light mist. It was a heavy gray curtain that swallowed my high beams and threw them back at me. I had to slow down to about 15 miles per hour just to make sure I didn't drift into a ditch. The houses started getting further apart. At first, there were trailers with porches sagging under the weight of rusted appliances. Then, there were just barns. Then, nothing but the skeletons of oak trees lining the road like ribs. The GPS voice, usually so confident, started to glitch. "In 500 feet, turn left," it stuttered. The left was a narrow gap in the trees that looked more like an old logging trail than a driveway. There was no mailbox, no light, nothing but a rusted gate that had been left swung open. I hesitated. I've seen enough horror movies to know that turning down a dark, unmarked road in the middle of the woods is a bad idea. But $24 is $24, and I was already this far out. I turned. The gravel here was different. Larger, sharper rocks that pinged off the undercarriage of my Honda Civic like gunshots. The road wound upward, getting steeper and narrower until the trees were practically scraping my side mirrors. I kept checking the app, but the little blue arrow was spinning in circles. Signal lost, the screen read. Great. I kept driving for another half-mile, figuring I'd eventually hit a clearing or house. Finally, the road ended. It didn't just stop at a driveway. It opened up into a wide, flat circle of dirt. In the center of the circle was a house. It was a 2-story farmhouse, the kind they built in the 1920s. It might have been white once, but now the wood was gray and weathered, looking like it was rotting from the inside out. There were no lights on in the windows, no cars in the drive, just the house standing alone in the fog. The delivery instructions on the app, which I had screenshotted earlier, thankfully, said, "Leave on the porch. Do not knock. I'm a heavy sleeper and the dogs will bark." I pulled as close to the porch as I could, keeping my engine running. I didn't like how quiet it was. Out here you should hear crickets, or the wind in the branches, or an owl. But it was dead. The kind of silence that feels like it's pressing against your eardrums. I grabbed the bag of food, stepped out of the car, and immediately felt the cold seep through my jacket. I walked up the 3 wooden steps to the porch. They groaned under my weight, the sound echoing through the empty clearing. I set the bag down next to a rusted screen door that was hanging off one hinge. As I turned to leave, something caught my eye. The window next to the door was dirty, covered in a thick layer of grime and cobwebs. But inside, right against the glass, there was a table. On the table sat a plate, a fork, and a glass of water. They looked brand new, completely out of place in this ruin of a house. And sitting next to the plate was a cell phone. The screen of the phone lit up. I leaned in, squinting. I could see the screen clearly. It was a delivery app, my delivery app. The screen showed a map of the area, and right in the center was a little blue icon of a car. My car. I felt a cold shiver run down my spine that had nothing to do with the Missouri winter. The phone on the table was tracking me. But if the customer was inside this dark, silent house, why were they sitting in the dark? And why was the phone all the way over here by the window? I didn't wait to find out. I turned and practically jumped off the porch, heading for my car. I had just grabbed the door handle when I heard it. A soft, clicking sound, like someone flicking a lighter. It came from the darkness of the porch, right where I had just been standing. I froze. I didn't want to look back, but I couldn't help it. Standing in the shadows, just inches from where I'd left the food, was a man. He wasn't tall, but he was wide, wearing a heavy, oil-stained canvas coat. He wasn't looking at the food. He was looking at me. Or rather, he was looking through me. His eyes were wide, unblinking, reflecting the faint light from my dashboard. He didn't say a word. He didn't move. He just stood there, holding a small silver object in his hand, the lighter he had just clicked. He wasn't lighting a cigarette. He was just watching the flame. "Food's there," I managed to stammer, my voice sounding thin and weak in the open air. The man didn't acknowledge me. He clicked the lighter shut. The darkness swallowed him again. I scrambled into my car, threw it into reverse, and slammed on the gas. My tires spun in the loose dirt, kicking up a cloud of dust and gravel before they finally caught. I did a frantic 3-point turn, my headlights sweeping across the front of the house. As the beams hit the porch, I saw that the man was gone. The bag of food was still sitting exactly where I'd left it. But the screen door was now wide open. I didn't stop until I reached the main gravel road. My heart was thumping so hard, I thought it might actually bruise my ribs. I kept checking the rearview mirror, expecting to see the white van or the man in the canvas coat following me. But there was only the fog. I finally got a bar of signal back, and the app chirped again. Delivery complete. Customer tip, $50. I should have felt relieved. That was a huge payday. But I just felt sick. I pulled over to the side of the road, my hands shaking so badly I could barely hold the steering wheel. I looked at the app again. The customer's name was listed as user_9921. No real name. No profile picture. I sat there for a long time, trying to steady my breathing. I told myself it was just a weird guy, a hermit, someone who didn't like people but appreciated his breakfast food. But then I remembered the phone on the table inside the house, the phone that was showing my location. If the man was on the porch when I dropped the food and the phone was inside on the table, who was looking at the phone? I didn't go back to work the next night, or the night after that. In fact, I didn't drive for the app for nearly 2 weeks. I stayed in my apartment, kept the door locked, and tried to convince myself I was being paranoid. Eventually, the bills started piling up, and I had to get back on the road. I told myself I would stay within the city limits. No more rural deliveries, no more pins on a map. It was a Saturday night, and the town was busy. I was making good money, and the weirdness of the gravel road was starting to feel like a bad dream. I accepted an order for a pizza place downtown. The drop-off was an apartment complex just 5 minutes away. I pulled into the complex, found the building, and walked up to the second floor. I knocked on the door of Unit 212. A young woman answered. She looked like a student, tired but friendly. I handed her the pizza, she thanked me, and I turned to walk away. "Hey," she called out as I reached the stairs. "Wait a second." I turned back. "Yeah?" "I think you dropped this," she said, holding out a small piece of paper. I walked back and took it from her. It wasn't a receipt. It was a Polaroid photo. It was a picture of me, or at least the back of my head. I was sitting in my car, looking at my phone. The quality was grainy, taken at night. In the background, I could see the distinct, harsh orange glow of the diner's parking lot. The photo had been taken from inside the diner, through the window, while I sat in my car waiting for Barb. On the back of the photo, written in cramped, jagged handwriting, were 4 words. The eggs were cold. I didn't say anything. I just turned and ran. I didn't go back to my car. I ran all the way to a nearby gas station and called a friend to come pick me up. I never went back for my car. I called the police, but what was I going to tell them? That someone took a picture of me. That I got a weird tip. They went out to the farmhouse a few days later, but they told me the place had been abandoned for years. They found no sign of anyone living there. No sleeping bags, no trash, no phone. Just a rotting house in the woods. But the thing that still keeps me awake, the thing that makes me jump every time my phone pings with a notification, isn't the man or the photo. It's the fact that when I finally worked up the courage to log back into the app to delete my account, I saw my order history. The delivery to user_9921 wasn't the first time I delivered to that account. Over the past 3 months, I had delivered to that same user 6 times. Every single one of those orders had been to a different, normal address in town, a park, a library, a grocery store. And every single time, I had followed the instructions to leave at the door or leave on the bench. He hadn't just followed me that one night. He had been watching me for months, learning my patterns, seeing how far out he could pull me before he finally decided to show himself. I moved across the state a week later. I don't do delivery work anymore. I work in an office now, under bright fluorescent lights, surrounded by people. But sometimes, when I'm walking to my car at the end of the day, I'll hear the faint, distinct sound of a lighter clicking shut in the distance. And I don't look back. I just keep walking. Because no matter how far you drive, some roads never really end. They just wait for you to turn around.